Nuno and João are partners from the Walking Mentorship, and they bring the inside look in the life of the people they walk with. The podcast Keep Walking With Me searches for potential solutions towards the best version of ourselves. Every month, we walk together with a guest. There is a disclaimer that needs to be shared. After listening to this program, you might feel the urge to step outside and go for a long walk. But don't worry, that is absolutely normal.
Welcome to the podcast Keep Walking With Me. Today we have a very special guest walking and talking with us. So let me ask, in a nutshell, who is Peter Hawkins?
Well, Nuno, first of all, it's lovely to be with you both. The question, who is Peter Hawkins, is one that I have spent over 70 years trying to answer. And I would say in that 70 years, I discover more each year, as I believe our potentiality only unfolds as life presents us new challenges. But currently, I would say my two most important roles in life are being a grandfather and being a gardener. But that's not what I'm well known for. I'm well known for probably transforming the field of coaching and the field of consultancy. I've run several consultancy businesses over my life. I've trained many OD consultants, coaches, written a lot of books about systemic team coaching. And my current book I'm writing is on beauty as a guide to the necessary transformation of human consciousness in leadership and coaching. So I'm very focused at the moment on how we have many challenges facing us in the world, but at root there is only one challenge, and that is all the challenges of climate change, global inequality, conflict, loss of biodiversity, inequality. All of those at heart are symptoms of the fact that our human consciousness is not evolved to keep pace with the power the human species has developed in the world.
Well, thank you so much, Peter. That is very, very thoughtful and deep. I think we could just keep going on that.
Well, but actually, a couple of years ago, we interviewed for our podcast your colleague David Clutterbuck, and I remember to hear him referring that what I think it seems to be an appreciation of both of you for thinking and discussing possibilities while walking. At least I think he mentioned that. Why do you think it's maybe easier to think outdoors? Or maybe if there's any story you want to share with us that maybe involves nature, walking and thinking? I mean...
So one of the things I continue to do is I try and reduce radically my global air miles, is I run advanced retreats here. I live on a beautiful property. I'll just show you the view from the window where I go walking.
All right.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
So what you'll realize is that I had the opportunity to walk straight from my house, and we have about 16 hectares, 37 acres of land here. And so it's a great opportunity between meetings and hours spent on Zoom to go out and reconnect with nature. And when I do the advanced retreats here for senior people who've been in the world of coaching and consultancy or leadership for a long time, we do quite a bit of work walking in pairs through the woodlands, through the valley, through the fields. And one of the things about coaching walking is that you're shoulder to shoulder, not face to face. We're both facing what's unfolding in front of us. And I often say to people, look, as you walk, be aware that you've got 3 levels of focus. You've got what's immediately under your feet. You've got the pathway opening in front of you. Yeah, and are you creating the path, or is the path creating your walking? Both are happening. There's a co-evolution in paths.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the path dictates where you walk, and where the path is dictated by where you walk.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely metaphor. There's also what's coming over the horizon,
Yeah.
changing weather, changing seasons. And it's such a good way of doing what we teach leaders around 3 horizon thinking. Horizon 1, business as usual. Horizon 2, innovating for tomorrow, being aware of what's emerging. But also, how do we do future foresight? Yeah. But the other thing that happens when we're walking is we tune in to the somatic rhythms of the person. We listen through our body, not through trying to make sense just of their words. We get into their rhythm of being. We pause with them. And there is more we learn from people through their rhythm than through their words. Yeah. In fact, there's a very interesting study. I can't remember where I read it, but that 2 of the great English poets, Wordsworth and Coleridge, who used to go walking together. They were first young poets. And they had 2 very different styles of walking, and you could hear it in their poetry. So Wordsworth would have this steady, rhythmical, slow pace, whereas Coleridge would stop and start and go off at angles and diagonals, and his rhythm would change and had a much faster drum beat to it. So you can tune into people's drum beats, their rhythm, their pace. And the third thing we teach around that is, and I'll tell you a story around this one, is what we call the pause. In the middle of COVID, I was supervising one of the many people I supervise as a senior coach consultant. And she said, look, because we're doing so many coachings on mobile phones, because the people are fed up being on Zoom all the time, and they want to go out for a walk in the middle of lockdown. So we both walk, listening to each other on our phones with an earpiece. But what she noticed that people, because they were trying to fit so much into the day, were walking faster and faster and doing half an hour rather than 1 hour sessions. And it was becoming very driven. Even the walking was driven.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, look, all you need to do is at some point halfway through, you just need to say, pause. Stop wherever you are, and I'll stop wherever I am. Look around you. What is the most beautiful thing that surrounds you right now that speaks to you? What has that got to say to what you're exploring? You may be in the middle of a city. It may be you suddenly see a child playing, or you see a tree going out of the concrete. Yeah, or you see some fruit outside a shop, or you're walking the country. What bird or plant or animal or tree is speaking to you? What would they be saying about the issue you're addressing? And that ability to use nature as an oracle. Yeah. As one of my great spiritual teachers said, we all share one great holy scripture, and that is the scripture of nature, which is beyond all our Bibles.
So beautiful.
Definitely. And sorry, João, I cannot resist to connect. We read somewhere that you are creating a woodland. So you mentioned in your when you do the retreats that you go to the woodland. Can you share with us a little bit, why are you investing probably something for your grandsons.
And granddaughters.
And granddaughters, grandchildren, sorry.
Yeah. So when we moved here, one of my great teachers is the land that I hadn't planned in my life to suddenly take on 16 hectares or 37 acres. I just wanted 2 or 3. But life conspired that we would end up here. And one of the questions, what it taught me was a different rhythm in life, because we've restored a walled garden. And I had to say to myself, look, this is a 15-year project, not a 6-month project.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had to look at, well, what did the fields need? I thought I could just let them go wild, but you can't do that because the grass grows up and thatches over, and you lose your biodiversity. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have to learn to have a natural wildflower meadow, how to move animals around. And then we look out, as I showed you, on these beautiful woodlands the other side of the river. Mm-hmm. And we had little bits of woodland. But what I was aware of is that we have a lovely bat colony 4 miles from here, greater horseshoe bats. And they need a corridor to fly out in the summer to wider and wider feeding grounds so they don't get eaten by all the owls. Mm-hmm. We need to keep the bats going to feed the owls, who are lovely. And then I realized that we have fields between us and a local school, and I worked with the Woodland Trust to plant a new woodland with 2.5, that particular bit of woodland. We planted other trees, but 2,500 trees. And I said, would they do this project with me with school children? We had 1,000 children planting trees. And they said, well, in 2005, we're celebrating the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Trafalgar. Mm-hmm. And we want to plant 33 woodlands, each replacing the number of trees it took to build one of those ships. So the school children learned about the Battle of Trafalgar, and this particular ship, this wood, is named after one of the smaller ships at 2,500. The biggest ships were 5,500 trees. Right. So if you like, we are restoring what was destroyed to fight battles. But they learned about the ship. They learned about the young children that were serving on it. From 12 years old, they had people in the battle. They learned about bats. They learned about planting trees. So it became a very rich kind of educational project, and it now provides a lovely little woodland path. We can do the coaching in circuits round. And of course now, just 18 years later, the trees are they're way taller than us.
Wonderful.
But also, woodlands teach you about how to think systemically. They teach you that there is far more happening beneath the surface than above the surface. That the trees, through the mycelium, kind of communicate with each other, and through the fungi and through the they to know a woodland, not just as a visitor, but from a woodlander, you have to live in it, and you have to experience it through different weathers, and the animals that live there, and the creatures that live there, and the cycles that it goes through. So you start to think in patterns and rhythms again. And that's where woodlands and walking connects, because we're walking in patterns and in rhythms, but within larger rhythms of the ecology.
Wow. Peter, it's so interesting, because it really looks like the word systemic. It's kind of glued to many topics today, either in coaching, mentoring, teams. Why do you think it has become such an important lever? And maybe how can we help maybe people to develop some kind of systemic being? if there is a need for such thing?
Yeah, you see, I think why there's a need is because, and you know, the UK and Portugal were probably at the beginnings of this. For the time of the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, period of colonization, you know, where I talk about the 3 C's, capital, carbon, and colonization went hand in hand with the period of the age of reason, the age of science. And what happened in all of that is our whole way of thinking became mechanized, became focused on the left brain neocortex, atomized in problem solving. And we lost a lot of our ways of thinking through the right hemisphere, which sees pattern and connection more, through our body knowing, our heart brain, head brain, and gut brain working together, our embodied brain, and our participatory consciousness and our collaborative consciousness. Everything got into, you know, being broken down into parts and problems. And to deal with the challenges of our time, we need to get back to a much more connected way of thinking and being. And by you see, I've written a lot about, it's no good just getting to systems thinking, because what happens is, you know, when I train coaches to become team coaches, they think, oh, I'm systemic because I'm working with a team rather than individual. No, you're just working with a larger bounded system. Yeah. And systemic awareness is realizing about nested levels of system and the dance between them. The individual is part of the family, as part of the extended family, part of the community, part of the human species, part of the more than human world. And then learning that all the systems we are nested within are also nested within us.
Yeah.
So, you know, I now say there's no such thing as individual coaching, because there is coaching with an individual, through an individual, but not of an individual. Because when an individual turns up for coaching, their team dynamic, their family dynamic turn up inside them. Their organizational culture turn up inside them. The ecology turns up inside them. And it's no good asking them questions about, you know, tell me about the organizational culture, because there's a lovely phrase in China, the last one to know about the sea is the fish. If you're swimming in the sea, you don't notice it.
You don't see it.
Yeah. So it's not that they tell us about those things, but we can sense all those nested systems playing out through them, being enacted through them. Yeah. So again, we have to listen with and through the individual, with and through the team. And that means we have to build our sensory antennae to hear levels of pattern. In my latest book, I talk a lot about Taoism and Chinese philosophy, and some from Japanese philosophy, where they have much more of a sense of, they talk about, you know, there is the immediate patterns, but behind that there is Li, which is what Gregory Bateson, the great systems thinker, called the pattern that connects. And there are almost levels of that, and our job is to somehow hear that coming through.
Yeah.
And just to link that to today's world, when I did the research for Henley Business School on tomorrow's leadership in the necessary revolution in today's leadership development. I spoke to a CEO and he said, listen, Peter, I've got lots of coaches who coach my leaders, lots of consultants who consult to parts of my organization. He said, that's not where our challenges lie. All our challenges lie in the connections, not in the people, not in the parts. And not just the connections between people, but the connections between teams, between divisions, between countries, between us and our stakeholders, between our different stakeholder needs. And he said, where are the people who can coach the connections? And if you like, a lot of my work is how do I train people to, first of all, you've got to see patterning connections. And then you've got to see what's disconnected that needs connecting. And that we can train ourselves in if we can learn from the wider systems we're part of.
Wonderful.
Peter, let me connect to, because it's been so rich what you've just said, and you have a very interesting interpretation of Darwin's theory of the survival of the fittest. And you mentioned the fittest as the most adjusted to the specific ecological niche, not in absolute terms, but specifically where you lie, and how that connects to teams and actually to organizations and people. Can you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yes, and just to be a little more nuanced or around that, it's not, you see, when Darwin talks about the survival of the fittest, he wasn't talking about the ones who'd been to the gym most.
Obviously.
Or the strongest.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about the fit between species and ecological niche.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just the ones who best adapt to the ecological niche, but dynamically co-evolve with the ecological niche, because the niche is also evolving.
Mm-hmm.
So the Chinese would say the li, the pattern, is also evolving and is emergent. So there is an ongoing fitting between species and niche, and between species and other species. That's how evolution has always worked. Yeah. And it's Gregory Bateson who first kind of, back in the 1970s, who woke me up to all of this. And you know, pointed out that the species that becomes too powerful and destroy, what happens is it then destroys its niche and therefore destroys itself.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So it's something about this dynamic dance. So I apply that to the unit of flourishing. You know, if the unit of survival is never the individual or the team or the team of teams or the organization or the country or the species, the unit of flourishing is never any of those. Right. So to talk about a high-performing team or an excellent organization is bad thinking. Right? The unit of flourishing is always any one of those in dynamic evolution with its context, with its ecological niche. Yeah, and we can see that, you know, if you look at Kodak or further back Olivetti, number one in typewriters, being number one, the dominant player in your field, is a dangerous place to be. Now apply that to species, it becomes more worrying. Big top of the food chain, the number one predator in the world and the dominator of the world that's destroying all the species around it. Very dangerous place to be.
Yeah, indeed.
Because you're the last to get the feedback from the world around you. Very practically, if you're Kodak, right, the changes in the world hit your bottom line last. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yes. But when they hit, they hit.
And you've left it too late to adapt and to adjust. And you could say the same with the human species.
Yes.
Right? It's we have already, we've had the sixth major extinction in the world, but the first to be caused by one species. So the whole ecological change is happening very fast, but rich, privileged humans will be the last to be hit by it.
Yeah.
And then it'll be too late. And all I'm saying is that if we can't shift human consciousness, then we can't deal with those issues.
Well,
and by the way, walking barefoot is even better than just walking.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Well, maybe Peter, this would be a good time for you to give us your first song, and maybe you want to explain such choice.
Well, actually the first one, The Rose, it's just that I think that the words of that song are so important. When you're feeling old and weary and the road it seems too long, and I have to remember the words now, just remember in the winter beneath the frozen snow lies the seed that comes the summer. No, that comes the sunshine. In the summer comes a rose, which is that sense of how do we find the active hope in the midst of the enormous challenges? And there's some guide in this song, because it says, some say love, it is a river that bends the broken reed, which is actually a line from the poet Mevlana Rumi, great Sufi. Some say love, it is a razor that leaves the heart to bleed. Some say love, it is a hunger, an ever aching need. But I say love, it is a flower, and you the only seed. So a call to awakening our potential, finding what is the seed that we have to nurture and allow to bloom and flourish, what we can uniquely do that the world of tomorrow needs. And then the next verse is lovely, which is it's the one afraid of falling that never learns to dance. And I teach a lot about, how do we enjoy quality failure? It's the one afraid of losing that never takes the chance. That how we can get obsessed with health and safety and restrictions and become non-entrepreneurial risk-taking. It's the one afraid of giving that. I've got that line, but a one afraid of dying that never learns to live. And in my new book, there's a whole chapter on the beauty of transience, death, and non-attachment, in which I quote one of my first spiritual teachers who said, the degree to which we can fully embrace life is the degree to which we can fully embrace death. And that's something else we learn from walking in woodlands.
Indeed.
And what we learn from making compost. So I have 6 compost bins in my garden, and I call it not death row, but death into life row. It is the place where death gets transformed into life, where living and dying come together.
Absolutely. Well, Peter, let's listen to The Rose then.
Some say love, it is a river that drowns the tender reed. Some say love, it is a razor that leaves your soul to bleed. Some say love, it is a hunger, an endless aching need. I say love, it is a flower, and you, its only seed. It's the heart that fears the breaking, that never learns to dance. It's the dream afraid of waking, that never takes the chance. It's the one who won't be taken, who cannot see to give. And the soul afraid of dying, that never learns to live. When the night has been too lonely and the road has been too long, and you think that love is only for the lucky and the strong, just remember, in the winter, far beneath the bitter snows, lies the seed that with the sun's love in the spring becomes the rose.
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful music. Let me maybe go a bit deeper. We talk a little bit about teams and people, and you have worked with, an incredible number of people, many different teams. What do you think are the characteristics, or let's say, the skills that are needed for each individual and maybe a whole as a team to become a great team? What does it take?
Yeah, interestingly, this morning I was giving a talk for a conference in India called Beyond the High Performing Team. And why I don't use that phrase any longer, because we see it as a place of arrival and it's a mechanistic notion, or we don't see the team in relationship to its context. And we used to believe that that you could create a great team by helping them have better relationships and all understanding each other's psychometrics, and actually all the research says that's not what's most critical, right? Successful teams are ones that have a very clear purpose, which they recognize they cannot achieve without collaboration. So I say it's the purpose that creates the team, not the team that creates its purpose. The purpose is there before the team arrives. Otherwise, we wouldn't create a team. Yeah. But then in all the books I've written, I then talk about how we don't create our purpose, we discover it. Yeah.
Mhm.
We don't create the path, we discover it. It may not have been walked before, but yeah. we're still discovering it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we discovered our purpose, we have to then turn that into, well, what are the clear objectives? What are the team KPIs? And only then do we know how we need to be, right, as a team in order to achieve those objectives to fulfill the purpose. And of course, the purpose keeps changing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, going back to walking, I remember years ago walking what's called the Seven Sisters in Scotland, and with my wife and 2 friends, and suddenly the clouds unexpectedly suddenly came right down, you know, and our visibility disappeared, and we had to find a way off the mountains, you know, because it was becoming unsafe. So we had to create a totally new pathway, and I had to go down Scree. And I remember it well because my wife was finding it very difficult to you know, to balance herself, and she did a lot of it just sliding down the Scree on her bottom. Her complete trousers wore through. So we then had to hitchhike back along the valley, and I had to walk behind her because you know, there was only her knickers at the back. But you know, this is such a good analogy for big organizations. Yeah. Right.
And it's so interesting, Peter, because let me just ask you, I cannot resist, because quite often when we are doing our walking mentorship programs, especially for corporations, they always ask us, is this team building or team development? So I send it back to you. Is there any difference? What is the difference?
Well, I do comment on the fact that you can see, you can find probably 100 books on team building, but tell me how many books you can find on team ending. You can find hundreds of books on, you know, the first 100 days, but where are the books on the last 100 days? In our society, everything is about growth, right? Which is just one phase of the cycle. Growth in childhood and growth in spring is fantastic, but you know, what's growth in late middle age? It's overconsumption, obesity, and cancer. We're addicted to growth. So team building, you know, for me, team building is just one early phase of how do we bring a new team together. Yeah. Team evolving, you know, is far more interesting than team building or team development. How are we evolving in dynamic relationship to this environment that we're in, and the many nested levels of the environment we're within? The organizational environment, the political, economic, social, and technological environment, the ecological ecosystem. Yeah.
Well, I guess, Noon, we need to change definitely the name in the brochure.
And then just another one about, you know, that thing about when you're walking. There's a lovely phrase from Eisenhower. When you go for a walk, planning is essential. But General Eisenhower said, but plans are useless.
Absolutely.
When you're up on the mountain and the weather changes, then actually, you know, and it's the same when you work with teams. You have to do your planning, you have to do your homework. But when you get in there, you know, I turn up at a top team, and as I arrived, the HR director met me at the door and said, look, you know, I just need to, before you go in there, just tell you the CEO's just been sacked. The team don't know it yet. My whole workshop design is out of the window.
Very dynamic.
Reminds Mike Tyson that everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So, or life happens. So basically, that's it. So, well, let me ask you here maybe a little provocation. Do you think all leaders benefit from having a coaching approach? Not necessarily being coaches, but having a coaching approach to their teams.
Yes, and yes, that they benefit from having a that sense of how do one of the key roles of any team leader is to grow the capacity of their team collectively and the capacity of each person, not to do their current job better, but to grow the collective capacity for the team to be future fit. Yeah. And to do that, you have to have a coaching approach, but not in the traditional sense of coaching that we're on the client's agenda. So when I coach, I'm not interested in being on the client's agenda or my agenda, right? I'm interested in being on the agenda that life is providing. Yeah. So I'm shoulder to shoulder and saying, what's the work? I don't ask what they want from coaching. I ask, what's the work that life's knocking on the door asking us to do today? Yeah. I don't believe, you know, we don't control the weather. We don't control the learning agenda.
No.
Any of us.
No.
And if we can have that sort of coaching where the person in front of you isn't your client,
yeah,
that's, I think, where we've gone wrong training leaders to be coaches, right? But they're your partner, and what we're both facing shoulder to shoulder is we're trying to find the way to the learning edge. And the learning edge is where they don't have the answer, I don't have the answer, but we're clear life, right, needs us to find an answer. That's where interesting meetings happen.
Yes.
All interesting meetings happen there. At the learning edge.
Yes. And actually, on that note, maybe Peter, you can give us on the learning edge a second music.
Well, the second piece that came to me, and it's partly, you know, I've in a month's time, I will have been with my wife for 48 years. And one of the things we love doing together is to go into opera. So I've chosen La Traviata, A, because it was the first opera we went to together. B, because the music, right? I remember coaching a CEO who said, I can't bear opera and I have to take clients because we sponsor the opera and I have to take clients to it. And I just said to him, well, look, try a little experiment. Find out the story of the opera before you go, right? So you're not trying to make sense of it here. I really know the story. And then when you go, stop listening to it with your ears and your left hemisphere neocortex. Try and breathe it in through your nose and listen to it with your fingertips, right? And just watch it flow through your whole body.
Yeah.
And this was a very introverted, legally trained CEO. Very, very left brain. And he said, he came back and said, I've never had an experience like that before. It's totally transformed my experience of opera. And there's something about Traviata where there's this intense love. And then there's this extraordinary scene of the dying. And the way you experience through the music, the singing, both this love and death, both of which are at the heart of fully living.
Well,
After this, I guess let's listen to La Traviata.
Let's breathe it in.
Yes.
Let's breathe it in, yes.
Oh
Well, thank you so much, Peter. This is such an inspiring, beautiful song. Well, as we discussed before, you are a grandfather, and you are obviously, you've shared with us your concern about the future, which should be reasonable for any reasonable person to have concerns about the future. But I've read somewhere that currently you think there is a growing gap between the challenges placed to leadership and the tools or the systems or the availability of support for that leadership to evolve. How do you see this unfolding?
Because I think, having been a professor of leadership, looked at leadership development, a lot of what has been taught over the years is really not leadership, but super management. How do we manage myself, manage my team, manage my function, manage my organization? Not how do we lead? And the other big mistake is we've seen leadership as residing in leaders, rather than seeing that leadership is a relational phenomena. Yeah, it's co-created. You can't have leadership without a leader, followers, and a shared purpose.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a leader, a shared purpose, but no followers, you have a voice crying in the wilderness. If you have followers and a shared purpose, but nobody orchestrating that and connecting it, you have a passionate mob.
Mm-hmm.
But in our society, what's very, very common is a leader and followers, but no purpose. You see it on the Twitter sphere, celebrityism. You've got people with 2 million followers, but there's no leadership there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have to help people realize that, to think triangulatedly. So there's a lot even written about leaders and followers, or leaders and purpose. But actually, we have to think in triangles, not in pairs. Our thinking is very dualistic. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And it's the purpose that creates the leader, like it's the purpose that creates the team. It's the purpose and the followers that create the leader. Yeah. It's the leader and the purpose that create the followers. Yeah, that they co-create each other.
Indeed.
So it's this. We need this radical new way of thinking, which is the question I use all the time is to ask of the leader, the team, the organization, what can you uniquely contribute to, right? That nobody else can, that the world of tomorrow needs, not that your stakeholders need today. And people say, well, I'm not unique. And I say, well, look, nobody occupies the place in the interconnected web that you occupy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No one has your network, your mixture of experience, your mixture of attributes and skills. And if you can find the unique contribution, it's not that you're special, but your place is unique.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. If you can find what's needed from that particular connecting place on the interconnected web, right?
Yeah.
And you can treat everything that comes over the horizon as a generous lesson from life. The cloud suddenly dropping and having to go down the scree. And you can find gratitude for life sending you that lesson, whatever the lesson is.
Yes.
Then you're in the right dance with the wider systems.
But it's so interesting. You're talking about dance and rhythm, because we are living as a society at a very fast pace. I mean, we all agree on that. But it also seems that the world keep actually asking us for even a higher speed of change because of, different reasons. So how is it possible actually to cope with such demands without collapsing along the way? And maybe what is the role of actually individual change on the big picture? Because you now mentioned the individual, and it's like a pixel in a gigantic image. What is the role of individual change, in your opinion?
Well, just if we think about individual change, we are changing every second. Right? The three of us aren't the same people that started this podcast.
Yes,
Right?
for sure.
Definitely.
We know that every atom in our being, in our bodily being, changes within 7 years. So I ask people, I'm actually interested in what stays the same. Because actually people who haven't seen Nuno for 8 years would still recognize him. But every cell of his is changed. He's probably wearing different clothes. So what connects you to you 8 years ago? Change is a constant. But where is the constancy?
Yeah.
So what I think we have to come to terms with is we are constantly changing, but we're not in control of that. But we know, for instance, that 98% of what's changing in our body we're totally unaware of, right? And even the things we think we're in control of, actually, our executive brain often comes in after the event. Yeah. So we're evolving with everyone who's around us. There's a constant, as if you look at subatomic physics, there's a constant dance going on.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's a dance between the levels vertically and a dance horizontally. So change is in the dance, in the unfolding. And so I think a lot of the personal development, I talk about 4 steps we can all do. Don't talk about problems, change the language to challenge. Very simple thing you can all do. Every time somebody says, I got a problem, you say, oh, that's great. Tell me about your challenge. Just very subtle reframe.
Yes.
Locate the challenge not in a person or a thing or a part, but in a connection. So people say, oh, we've got this impossible boss, right? So I would then say, oh, I hear you've got a challenge that you haven't yet found a way of engaging your boss positively.
Yeah.
Right? We've relocated it. Right? The challenge never lies in a person or a part. Then once you've located it there, you see it as this is the next lesson that life's decided to put on your agenda. Right? Because we know that if you don't deal with this boss, you'll find another impossible boss in your next job.
Yes.
Right? If you divorce your partner, you'll find the same problem turns up in the next wife or the next husband or the next job. Yeah. Life has a way of giving us endless repeats.
Opportunities to learn.
Yeah. We could resit the exam over and over again until we get the lesson. And so personal change happens, right? Not inside the person or outside the person, but in the connect, where the inside and the outside connect. Where we do have the only place we probably have choice is how we respond.
Yes. Yes.
We don't have control, but we have response ability.
Yeah.
And that's where I like, the problem is we still see leadership development as starting with a curriculum. right, which is dreamt up by the university or the trainers, rather than actually the curriculum's out there. Right. Let's take the training to where the curriculum really lives, rather than yeah. In the classroom.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. And there is certainly, I think, a very good learning in understanding that reality teaches much more than school can ever do, because it's always looking to the past and reality is happening right now. But on that note, maybe it's time for you to share your third music.
Yes, just before I do, just say, theory and models have their place in the same way as we have maps to go on a walk.
Yeah.
Or we have Google, or right. We also have spectacles. They provide different lenses to shift our way of looking.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they don't provide what we should be looking at. And if we spend all our time on the walk looking at the map, we don't learn very much.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So this last piece I used on my recent retreat to help people focus on the space between. In Japan, they talk about ma. If you look at a tree, in Japan, they say the beauty of the tree is not in the branches, but the space between the branches, the space between the notes, the space between the colors. And in the West, we're very poorly trained in listening and seeing the space between, the dance rather than the dancers. So as people listen to this lovely piece by Arvo Pärt, the Estonian composer, beautiful. He's now in his 80s or 90s, still alive, very spiritual composer. It's a very slow piece, and I invite people to just listen, to see if you can listen to the spaces between the notes, between the left hand of the piano player and the right hand, between the conversation space between the violin and the piano. So don't try and listen to it differently, to hear the spaces between left hand, right hand, violin, piano, until you can hear the silences between the notes. This is great training.
Wow.
So let's listen to the space between.
thank you, Peter, for this third song. I mean, we are really reaching the end of our conversation, so we just have a couple of, I would say, final questions, but not necessarily the easiest ones. Sometimes they even call it curveballs, but let's hope not. Well, the first question we have for you is that if you could take off on any adventure today, no constraints, what would it be and why?
Any adventure. Well, this may be a curved answer, but given what I've said earlier, I would love to see every day as an adventure, right? And to come at the end and say, wow, that today was not what I expected. What I ended up saying here was not what I expected to be sharing with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm about to go to Korea to teach. The first time I've taught systemic team coaching in Korea. And I always say to those courses, you know, if I don't learn something new, teach something new, and upgrade something about the program, this will be the last one I ever teach.
Yeah.
And I make them responsible for the next program happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because so there is something about making the notion that we don't have to go, you know, we don't have to be like Elon Musk or Richard Branson and go to Mars, right? That there's an adventure on our doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Every time I walk through my walled garden or my woodland, right, it teaches me something new.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot agree more with you. It's beautiful. Yeah.
So maybe I follow up with another question, which is, if we are missing anything as humans, is there anything missing globally?
If we're meeting everything.
Anything.
So say the question again. If we are
we missing anything as humans? Is there anything that we are lacking or not being capable of?
so let's end with the notion that well, I get there by saying people bring me enormous. I supervise consultants and coaches right around the world, and they bring great challenges. And I say, look, when you get to the learning edge, your client will panic, you'll panic. At that stage, don't try harder. I say, they say, so what do we do? And I say, you pray. And I don't mind who you pray to, as long as it's a system bigger than you.
Mm-hmm.
And the notion of systemic prayer, which is actually human beings learning the humility to learn from what Robin Wall Kimmerer says is from a Native American tradition. She's a botanist and also from the Native American tradition. She says, remember, we are the youngest child of creation. And we have to have the humility to learn from those who've been here far longer, our brothers and sisters who've been here far longer than we have. And so, you know, what we as human beings are most lacking is humility and a sense of the mystery of the sacred, which is being here for way before we arrived, very late on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be here way beyond
Yes.
we as a species.
Mm-hmm.
And just to be in awe of the mystery and the oneness and the sacredness of the unfolding of creation. Yeah. You know, if we can hold that in our hearts in the midst of all the bombardment of daily challenges and whatever we do, then we're working from source, not from effort.
Yes. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Peter, we are approaching the end of our walk today, unfortunately, because it leaves us really with this feeling that we could and we should walk much longer with you, because there's so much. The good thing is that we are recording the podcast and we can listen in repeat many, many times. And this is wonderful. We have one last question for you. So if you had a time capsule and we will, be able to you will be able to put a message inside, or an item, whatever, something inside that will shoot it into the universe. And who knows, maybe next year, maybe 1,000 years from now, either someone or something will open up this time capsule. What would you like to place inside as a message?
Well, there'll be two, I think. The first would be to apologize to future generations for what our incredibly privileged generation has done to the world. And to say, I'm sorry, we could not do more to rectify the damage we've done. And the second would be a quote from my first spiritual teacher, which is, you can always love more. And the more isn't just a matter of quantity. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of how far you can reach.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So that would be my message. You can always love more.
Well, I don't think we could finish any better this conversation than with that beautiful quote. Well, Peter, thank you so much for this absolutely wonderful conversation we've had. You've been so generous and you've shared so much with us and with our audience, naturally. It's been amazing learning. Definitely, we're very different from where we began a few minutes ago.
Yes.
And really, I'm looking forward to listen again and again, because definitely a lot to learn here.
Well, thank you. And your followers are welcome to join me on LinkedIn, where I do regular blogs on a number of these themes.
Well, for sure. We will place this information, and I'm sure that people will be grateful. And once again, thank you for this opportunity to walk and talk with you. It really felt like a walk.
Well, hopefully many of your listeners will be able to listen to this while they're walking, hopefully and we'll be able to pause and see how what's around them has more to say than I have.
Wow. And thank you for the music. I think it will help a lot on the walk as well.
Thank you.
Keep Walking With Me. It is a podcast inspired by the walking mentorship experience. Step by step, we walk together towards the best version of ourselves. For more information about our mentoring programs, visit our website walkingmentorship.com.